WIBW's Candidate Forum, featuring the Republican candidates in the state's 2nd Congressional District, moderated by Melissa Bruner and David Oliver.
Good evening, and thanks for joining us for our special Decision 2024 coverage. The Republicans vying for the Kansas 2nd Congressional District seat address the issues important to you.
This is an open race, Melissa. Incumbent Jake LaTurner is not seeking re-election, so we're here to help you tonight to get to know those who want to take his place. We are very pleased to have all 5 Republicans in this race with us tonight. You'll see these gentlemen on your ballot coming up in a couple of weeks. Jeffrey Kars, Michael Ogle, Derek Schmidt, Sean Tiffany, and Chad Young. Gentlemen, thank you for being here tonight.
And here's how we'll move through our forum this evening. Each candidate will have 1 minute for an opening statement, and we'll reserve time for each to give a 1-minute closing statement. We'll limit answers to questions to 1 minute each, and we are using alphabetical order to determine the order, rotating who goes first, second, and so on. Which brings us to our opening statements, beginning with Jeffrey Kars.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. My wife and family and I, we live here in Topeka. And I'm running because our country is in serious trouble. And we were all reminded of that just this last weekend in Pennsylvania. And it's important that we need to pull together as a country. We have an open border. Our country is less safe. Our communities are less safe because of that open border. We have runaway inflation that's completely out of control, and everything costs too much. Our culture is collapsing. It seems like families, children, our common values, and our culture are under attack from the extreme left. And it's important that we do something about this in Congress, and that's why I'm running for Congress. I used to work for President Trump, and I strongly support President Trump. I support his agenda, and he's going to need a strong, consistent, courageous conservative to support him in his policies in Congress. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kars.
I'm Michael Ogle. I live in Topeka, Kansas. I am running for Congress because we need congressional term limits. And if you want congressional term limits without a constitutional convention, you're going to have to vote for a candidate that will vote for congressional term limits and advocate for them. I think that we need to secure the American economy on the back of American energy. We have just got out of a 20-year war in Afghanistan. We didn't get out for any good reason. We got out because the Biden administration wanted to let China in to mine lithium. China is buying up swaths of land the size of Nebraska in Africa. Mining lithium is not a green process. And we need to secure American energy production, and we need to stop buying up Chinese energy and make sure American jobs and American economy, a lower price at the pump and a lower price for goods and services can be secure on the back of American energy. I'm for a secure border. I work for the Veterans of Foreign Wars as a service officer, and I'm for the veteran candidate, the pro-veteran candidate in this race.
I'm Derek Schmidt. It's going to take more than talk to get America running again. I have a proven record of standing tall for our conservative values and delivering. As your Attorney General, I fought back and defeated Barack Obama's WOTUS overregulation of our farmland, stood up to Joe Biden and stopped him from his giveaway on student loans, led the fight here in Kansas to ban sanctuary cities, sued Big Pharma for peddling addiction to our kids and our neighbors, and brought back more money to fight addiction than ever before in the history of our state. And I was always there fighting hard to defend President Trump's America First agenda. I've been to the U.S. Supreme Court for you 8 times. 3 of those times personally argued those cases and won them all for you and for Kansas. I'm running for Congress because we need someone who can stand up, fight, advance our agenda, and make sure that as we get this country on track, Kansas is strongly represented.
Derek Schmidt. Next up, Sean Tiffany.
Good evening. I'm Sean Tiffany, a proud and lifelong Kansan, Christian, and conservative. I was raised by working class parents in Council Grove, which is where my wife and I have chosen to raise our 5 children and grow our business. 17 years ago, my brother and I bought the business that we grew up working in with nothing more than a handshake, a tremendous amount of work ethic, and a great deal of blessings. I am a product of the American dream, and we have grown that business from 6 employees to over 60. But that American dream is under attack by the radical left, and the career politicians have done nothing to stand in the gap on our behalf. I believe it's time to send an outsider and a cowboy to Washington, D.C. to fight and stand with President Donald Trump to protect Kansas values, to keep the American dream alive, and keep the radical left at bay.
Mr. Tiffany, thank you. Chad Young.
My name's Chad Young, and I live in Lawrence. I know who we're fighting. I know the attack we're under. I know how to stop them. We're looking at big pharma, big corporation, and big government attacking the people and selling us out for everything we have. They have an agenda against the free, sovereign people of this great nation. We must stand against them as hard as we can to do the best we can to survive and keep our sovereignty. Today's the day that we fight back and we do anything and everything that we can to stop them from attacking us. It's time to close the borders. It's time to fight back. And we ask ourselves this question: why aren't our borders closed? Because big corporation does not want them closed. Thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you for your opening remarks. Let's get to the substance now. The issues important to you. Our first question, folks, tonight reflects the events that have certainly drawn our attention the past several days. Saturday's assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump. It has drawn attention to the high-charged nature of politics in recent years and calls to tone down the rhetoric. So the question is, what, if anything, do you think needs to change about campaigns and politics, and how will you work to make that change? And now we're going to take our answers right now. First answer tonight from Michael Ogle.
We need to return to the rhetoric of our founders. Our founders were revolutionaries. They fought for our freedom. They fought for our independence. They secured our independence. The long history of America is the long struggle for liberty, and it's time to provide those blessings of liberty for everybody that is a citizen of the United States. As we saw Donald Trump shot, as political unrest happens, I want to encourage you to love your family, and I want to encourage you to love the members around you that surround you, your church, whoever you're with. I want you to take time for that, because there's going to come a time when you may not be able to. As a soldier, I've gone forward and I've done the hard things for this nation. I'm willing to go forward and do them again, and I would like you to be rest assured that if you send me to Washington, I'm going to be able to do the hard things for you, and I'm going to be able to fight that fight for you. And I need you to make a strong family and a strong relationship with your church and a strong relationship with those who you love.
All right, now an answer from Derek Schmidt tonight.
Well, like I know all Americans, I thank Almighty God that President Trump was missed and that he is alive and able to carry on. Look, there have been terrible acts of violence throughout American history, most done by people who are deranged, who are imbalanced, who are improperly motivated, whatever it may be. I think that to blame anybody but the shooter or whoever may be behind all of this distracts us from what's really going on here. Look, we have to focus in our politics on issues. I believe that. I think we have to focus on the interests of you, the viewers and the people of the 2nd Congressional District. We have to put those issues and those needs front and center. But we can't shy away from that simply because some individual in Pennsylvania did a terrible, horrendous, unthinkable act. And I know that all of my colleagues here will join me in prayer, not only for President Trump and our nation, but also for those who lost their lives and are seriously injured in Pennsylvania.
Thank you for the answer there. Now to Sean Tiffany.
Well, last Saturday's events were shocking, not just to myself, but to the nation. And we do live in the greatest country that has ever existed. And praise God that he kept his hand on President Donald Trump and preserved him in order to be the next president of the United States of America. And furthermore, I'm thankful that Saturday's events steeled our nation. It has drawn the Republican Party together and perhaps drawn folks that were on the fence or maybe even a little to the left together to go forward and make our country great again. Like President Donald Trump, I feel like our country was not set up to be led by career politicians and bureaucrats. I think it's time to send outsiders to Washington, D.C. who are bold enough to say what people in the district are thinking and say it out loud and say it boldly. That way the left knows exactly what we're thinking. It's time to do something different if we want to get something different out of Washington, D.C.
Thank you very much. Now to Chad Young.
Well, once again, we see where big government has failed the security of Donald Trump. They put a slum of security on him. They did not stand up for him once again. We, the people, must stand together in unity. And I say this a million times, there was no joint action by our government. They did not care for Trump. I care for Trump, and I'll fight for what Trump stands for, because that's the very reason. We need unity, a joint action by a group of people in which group unity and efficiency are placed above individual interest, not the nonsense in Washington. Vote for a patriot, not a politician. It was patriots that brought this great nation together, and it'll be patriots that seal it.
Thank you very much. And finally tonight from Jeffrey Cars.
Well, thank you for that question, and I alluded to this earlier. Our country's in trouble. It's in serious trouble. We were reminded of that in that terrible act that happened in Pennsylvania. And even President Biden acknowledged that his rhetoric needed to be toned down. And there's going to be questions about the Secret Service and how this catastrophic security failure took place. But the important thing is that President Trump survived this attempt. I'm confident that he is going to be elected. I know that the Lord God above intervened and to save his life. And my wife and I and all of us are very thankful for that. And the president is going to need strong, consistent, courageous conservatives like myself to serve with him in Congress to make sure that he is successful with his agenda. We don't have time for people that just like to do the right thing, but that are people that are willing to do the easy thing. But we need members of Congress that will do the right thing. And that's why I'm running for Congress.
Thank you all. Continuing with discussions that have been amplified by those recent events. Saturday's assassination attempt, along with school shootings we've seen nationwide, continue to draw attention to how people may access guns in our country. What changes, if any, should be made to gun laws? And if your answer is none, how would you address the issue of gun violence? This question goes first to Derek Schmidt.
Well, I always have been and remain a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. I'm the candidate endorsed by the National Rifle Association in this race, and also am one endorsed by the Kansas State Rifle Association. And that's been true throughout my career in public service. Look, I don't believe that the firearms, which are a tool, are the problem. I believe that the misconduct of individuals in our society, whether they are deranged or ill-motivated, those are the problems. I worked with prosecutors and law enforcement all over this state for many years. We saw many terrible acts of violence in our communities. And yet, in every case, we knew that the justice had to be directed at the individual who conducted the bad act, not at an inanimate object. One of the last things I did while I served in public office was to recommend enhanced criminal penalties in our state for people who use firearms to commit violent acts against other people, an extra penalty. That was widely supported in the Second Amendment community, and it ultimately did become law in Kansas. That's the type of thing we need to focus on.
Thank you. Sean Tiffany.
Well, I am a lifelong gun owner and avid outdoorsman. The fact is, I grew up in an era where guns were the norm, and in a community where guns were the norm. And there were not school shootings or assassination attempts when I was a child. I think the thing that has changed is we no longer address mental illness as a nation, and we have radicalized a segment of the population to where they don't even respect human life anymore and the dignity of human life. And we need to come together as a nation and just really work together to come to common sense solutions and protect the Second Amendment. The reality is the Second Amendment was never existed for hunting or outdoors. This was in order to defend the nation against a tyrannical government, and we need to protect the Second Amendment with everything that we have.
Thank you, Sean Tiffany. Chad Young.
Well, the answer clearly is this, and I respect every man that sits here today, but the answer clearly is this. I ran a nonprofit for troubled youth, young men and young women and veterans. And I would take some of the veterans and teach some of the young women and men and young children how to handle a weapon, what the rules were. We don't have that in America because we're so divided with husbands and wives and divorce. We have to bring it back to where father figures can step in and teach, where veterans can be placed in schools to protect schools. No, we're losing 19,000 veterans a year. We can put them and make a program where they can protect. We have to have answers, just not a bunch of blah. That doesn't work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chad Young. Jeffrey Cars.
Thank you for that question. I'm a very solid supporter of our Second Amendment rights. I'm proud to have the endorsement of the Kansas State Rifle Association, and unequivocally, we do not need any more laws on the books that restrict guns and rifles for law-abiding citizens. If anything, we may have too many laws on the books. The problem is the morality of this country. We've had a moral collapse in our country. We didn't used to have these type of incidents that are happening now. The moral climate of our country is collapsing. Our country needs to get back together. We need to look above for the answer to God above, and we need to make sure that there's plenty of help for folks that do have mental illness. We need to harden our schools. We need to make sure that there's police officers at every school if the school is requesting that, and we need to make sure that we do everything we can to protect our Second Amendment rights. I will not support any legislation in the Congress that does anything that further restricts the right to own and bear arms.
And Michael Local.
I'm against any federal law that would infringe on your right to keep and bear arms. I'm absolutely not for the ATF. I think that if anything, Congress should, or maybe even the states, as different states have different tolerances, should address activity of what they should call militia activity. And if we have heavier set guns, maybe crew-served guns, that those things should be regulated to private property or ranges. The issue I have is that we don't have an education on our rights anymore. We've turned civics into social studies, and we need to educate people on what guns or firearms are, what is it to be armed, and what is that responsibility. And if that's not in our schools, and if the education piece isn't there about rights, it's not going to go good. We need to get our kids off the Ritalin and start getting them to exercise, walk to school maybe, or get them to run around, because the Ritalin isn't doing any good for them. It's making them crazy.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much for your responses. That concludes our first segment here in our live forum tonight. We have a lot more ground to cover.
Our discussion with the Republicans seeking the state's 2nd congressional district seat continues in a moment. Welcome back to our conversations with the candidates.
We turn our attention now tonight to the economy and what everyone is paying for everything they need these days. While the rate of inflation has slowed, the cost for many items remains high compared to what it was 5 years ago. Question tonight, what should the federal government do to rein in inflation and keep down the cost of living? We'll begin our answers right now with Sean Tiffany.
Well, as a businessman, I'm really the only candidate on the stage that fully understands the implications of what rampant inflation and excessive interest rates are doing to our businesses as well as our families. The first thing we need to do is support President Donald Trump and drill, baby, drill. We need to open up America's energy independence once again that we forfeited 4 years ago when Biden got into office. The other thing we need to do is we need to stimulate our economy and put America first in every trade deal that happens. In order for families to thrive in the United States of America, we need to get government out of day-to-day businesses and let capitalism work. The sad reality is today, groceries are more expensive than they were 4 years ago, fuel is almost 50% higher, and housing for many Americans has become completely unaffordable. Interest rates are killing our economy and America's families and businesses throughout the Kansas district.
All right, Mr. Tiffany, thanks. And now to Chad Young.
We have epic inflation, never seen before in American history. And we have to say, who is that we're truly fighting? Who's putting the American people in this situation? Our government has sold out the people, have taken bribes from the Senate to the Congress to even the president. They're the problem, and we need to shrink government, get control of government, and we'll get control of the inflation. We'll build jobs here. Tax the outside countries that are selling us goods. Stand on that, and it's guaranteed that we'll make it through. Tax them. If we buy goods, and hey, if they say no, we won't send our goods, then build them here in America. Put them in checkmate. That's the way to do it.
Chad Young, thank you. Jeff Cars.
Thank you for that question. Well, it's very simple. We have to stop spending money. We're buying things we don't need with money we don't have. We have to tell the Federal Reserve to stop printing dollars. The first thing we need to do is we need to defeat Joe Biden in November, and that's going to happen. And we need to elect a Republican House and a Republican Senate to get our budget under order. We don't need all these cabinet agencies, Department of Education, Department of Commerce. We have to go and look at every program, every cabinet agency. People like Steve Forbes says that $50 trillion could be a tipping point for our currency. We're on projection to be at $50 trillion by the end of the year. How can we stimulate the economy? Well, the first thing we're going to have to do in the new Congress, and I look forward to voting for it, is to renew the Trump tax cuts. That will stimulate the economy. But then we have to go look at everything. I don't support earmarks. I don't support omnibus appropriations bills. I intend to caucus with the most conservative members up there of the House Freedom Caucus, Jim Jordan's group, and these are the people that are serious about spending and fiscal policy, and I look forward to doing that.
Thank you, sir. Now to Michael Ogle.
I was watching an interview today with Donald Trump and Oprah from 1988, and Donald Trump then said we need to ask our allies to do their fair share, and we do. Europe can defend Ukraine if they want to. We have to stop spending money. America's role in the world is nuclear deterrence. So if we get our money down, stop spending money on unnecessary foreign entanglements, we will be fine. We need to get American energy going. We need to get American oil going, and we need to secure the back of the American economy for a lower price of goods and services, a lower price at the pump, a lower price for groceries, all based on what it costs to get the product to market. And that happens with American energy. We can't afford to subsidize Chinese energy. We have to realize that there is an economic war with China going on, and we have to have American energy to get our cost of goods and services down and secure American independence.
Thank you, sir. And finally, our inflation question now to Derek Schmidt tonight.
Well, I understand just how hard this economy is on many, many Kansans in the 2nd Congressional District. I feel it in my own life. I know you feel it in yours. Everywhere I go in this district, people talk to me about, Derek, we just can't afford the life that we had a year or 2 short years ago. And I can't tell you how often I'll be in a meeting with a few Kansans and we'll be talking about whatever the subject is, including inflation and the cost of living. And when we're done with that meeting, I'll walk out to the truck and somebody will follow me out. And they'll say, Derek, I didn't want to say this in front of everybody, but I'm going to tell you, I am the person, I am the family that you're talking about. We've never had trouble paying our bills before, and we do now because of Bidenomics and this inflation. So I get it. Look, the question is, what are we going to do about it? And I think there are 2 things that are at the top of the list. First of all, if you're in a hole, stop digging. Inflation, higher prices are driven by too many dollars chasing too few goods. The amount of government spending has exploded starting at COVID. They use that as the excuse. And we need to roll that back at least to pre-COVID levels as a starter. And second, we have to extend the tax cuts.
Thank you, gentlemen. Let's turn to immigration. What should the U.S. do about people who are in the country illegally or trying to enter the country illegally? Under what circumstances should people be allowed in? Chad Young, this question goes first to you.
We close every door, every window. We don't allow one more to come in. We don't stand for that no longer. 7 million to 9 million have crossed the border, and we don't know who they are. Obviously, Donald Trump was shot at once. It's not going to end by allowing China to come across the border, to allowing our enemies across the world to come across the border and to hurt us. We are looking at massive terrorist attack across the board. We shut that border and we send back every last one of them. But we send them back with a Bible so they can get to know Jesus. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Jeff Cars.
Thank you for that question. Well, my position has been very clear on the border situation. We have a war going on our southern border. Under this president, we have an open border. We have to close the border. We have to secure the border. Congress needs to give President Trump authority to use the military to secure the border until the fence is secured. And then we have to deport all of these illegals that President Biden has let in, the military combatants, the sex traffickers, and the drug traffickers. We have to close the door down there. I'm all for legal immigration, but we even need to take a look at that. But I have the strongest position here. I have the strongest record on immigration. My position has always been this way. Unfortunately, two of my opponents here that are on the stage with me, one of them when he was in the state Senate voted against E-Verify 5 times. E-Verify is the one thing that makes sure that illegal aliens in America don't take our jobs. He also voted to provide benefits for illegals. And the other colleague that is on the stage with me comes from an industry that is very lax when it comes to illegal immigration. So I will strongly support what President Trump's policy will be to deal with the border and to deal with illegal aliens.
Thank you. Michael Ogle.
Well, I've worked in border security when I was in the Horn of Africa. We secured the border from Yemenis terrorists that would come over from al-Shabaab terrorists. And I would say we need to send our Army Rangers down to raid and destroy drug traffickers, drug smugglers, and human traffickers. If you want to engage in that kind of criminality, I don't have any use for you. I want to send Foreign Internal Defense to build solid citizens in Mexico that can oppose that kind of criminality. We think we need to use the National Guard at the border, and we need to have Gray Eagle assets to surveil. Now, here's the deal. We will create a huge problem if we separate children from their families. We cannot separate children from their families. Children that don't have families tend to grow up and be very angry adults, and we can't have that. So as long as the parents are trying to be good parents, I think we need to ease the path to citizenship and ease the path to citizenship for people that want to come here and be an asset.
Michael Ogle, thank you. Derek Schmidt.
America is a nation of immigrants. We also are a nation of laws, and we must enforce our laws at the southern border so that we put America first in immigration policy on who may come and who must go. I have the strongest record on this stage in fighting illegal immigration. In January of 2022, I went to the southern border at the invitation of Texas Governor Greg Abbott and Attorney General Ken Paxton. They asked me to come down and take a look so that we could help Texas to stand in the gap while Joe Biden dismantled the Trump immigration policies that were working. I did that. I'm grateful to have the endorsement of Attorney General Paxton in this race. He knows what it takes. I've also been to the U.S. Supreme Court, all the way to the High Court, to make sure that Kansas can enforce our laws against illegal immigrants in this country. And I have prosecuted people who have come across our border illegally, and they have committed terrible, heinous acts against Kansans right here in our communities, murders and rapes. That's not the majority, but every one of those people should never have been here. No Kansan should have been victimized. We must enforce the Trump border policies.
Derek Schmidt, thank you. Finally, Sean Tiffany.
Knowing that this is the most important issue to the district, I actually took the time last month to go down to the border and see it for myself. It is a foreign invasion, it is a national security threat, and it is a humanitarian crisis. I will stand with President Donald Trump to build the wall and defend our border with the military. The reality is the Biden administration cares more about the borders of Ukraine than they do our own. And that is why all of these deplorable people have come into our nation, to drain our taxpayer benefits and enjoy things that they didn't contribute to in our country. The reality is the folks that are coming here are doing so because they've been incentivized to do so. During his time in the legislature, Derek Schmidt voted to allow in-state benefits in-state tuition for illegal immigrants, when hardworking Kansas families, much like the one I grew up in, can't afford to send their own children to college.
Thank you, gentlemen. We have reached the midway point in our forum. We have more questions for the Republican candidates in the state's 2nd congressional district race coming up in 90 seconds.
Republican candidates in the state's 2nd Congressional District. And now, here's Melissa Bruner and David Oliver.
And indeed, we are glad to have you along for our live broadcast here this evening. Our next question for the candidates looks at Social Security. A recent analysis from the Population Resource Bureau found the number of Americans age 65 and older is going to increase 47% from 2022 to 2050. That makes Social Security a concern for a lot of people. The question tonight: what do you propose that would keep the program viable in the long run so that people who paid into the program will receive the benefits that they are expecting? Again, we're rotating alphabetically. Jeff Kars, you get the first response.
Well, thank you for that's a great question. We have to look at every entitlement program to make sure that they're going to be here later on when the people that have paid into them need to kick in for themselves. So for Social Security, we need to make sure for the folks that are already on Social Security that the benefits will be there. But the reality is we're going to have to raise the retirement age for people that are younger now. That's the only way to make this program sustainable. Right now, it's looking to be underwater within the next 10 years. So something has to happen. But we also have a huge budget deficit. We have an enormous debt. We're going to be at $50 trillion by the end of this decade. So we're going to have to look at every part of the government to determine how we're going to get our debt under control. We cannot have a sovereign debt crisis in this country. We cannot allow ourselves to get to that place. So we have to look at everything. But for seniors that are on Social Security, we need to make sure that those benefits remain. But for folks that are younger, we're going to have to raise that retirement age as people are living longer.
All right, thank you, Mr. Kars. Now to Michael Ogle.
Social Security was a bad program to begin with, and if you started out on Social Security, you got a great benefit, but now we don't expect the benefits to last. So my proposal is capital security. It's $3,000 paid in for every child born in America. There's about 3.2 million children born. That $3,000 gets put in the market at a 12% rate of return for 65 years. It's now worth $1.4 million. The child gets the citizen then gets a dividend or a bond interest cut of about $90,000 a year, and then we take it when the citizen dies, we roll that in 1.5 million back into the general fund. So we end the need for excessive taxation. We end the need for taxation. We get the citizen on a program where the economy works for them. We teach them about the market. Capitalism works for everybody, and we can get there if we have to address the gap, but we can get there. We need an actuary to do that, and I can get there with a little bit more time.
All right, thank you, sir. Now to Derek Schmidt on the Social Security question.
Well, I agree with President Trump. We must not cut benefits for those who are relying on Social Security, and I think that is particularly important in this time of high inflation when it's increasingly difficult to make ends meet, especially for people who are on fixed incomes. We do have to ensure the long-term solvency of the Social Security system so that we can ensure those benefits are paid over time. That was done once before, and our own Bob Dole in Kansas was part of that discussion many, many years ago. It is going to be time for one of those discussions again to make sure that system remains solvent. I think this is an area that is ripe for us to look at. Right now, when people pay into their own retirement through Social Security, those funds are supposed to be put into a trust fund that earns a return over time to help fund those retirement benefits. But the reality is Congress has continued to take the money out of the trust fund and use it, putting back a bunch of IOUs with a low interest rate for other purposes. I think we have to stop raiding the trust fund, and just like with Kansas retirement systems, we have to look at ways to get a higher rate of return out of those monies to support long-term benefits.
Thank you very much for the answer there. And now to Sean Tiffany.
America made a contract with its citizens when they started paying into Social Security. So anybody that's ever paid a dime into this system should not be cut of any of their benefits. But we do need to look at creative ways to continue the program. One that I would propose is under no circumstances should seniors ever have to pay taxes on the Social Security benefits. This is something that they paid into the system and it belongs to them. Career politicians couldn't keep their hands off the system, and they've used those monies to do other things in our government. The first thing we need to do is we need to get our federal debt down. The interest on our debt today exceeds Social Security payments. We need to cut government spending in departments like the Department of Education, and then we can use the interest savings to keep Social Security alive and well. Those that have not ever paid into Social Security, we may need to look at a different option for them going forward, or increasing the retirement age. But there are ways to do it, and nobody better than a businessman to come to those decisions.
Okay, and now to Chad Young.
You don't touch Social Security for any reason. They're thieves. It's obviously the politicians are thieves. That's what they want to do. They want to steal again from the American people. So it's very simple. You abolish 3 major programs in government: FBI, CIA, and education. You take the leftover money and give it to our people. It's time to abolish some of the arms of government, and if we don't, they'll continue to use and abuse, and we can no longer do that. Let's for once use and abuse them. Let's put them out of the program, like Ronald Reagan said. We drive the car, we drive the car. Kick them out now. We don't need them in the car with us. We need to cut several branches off of our government and give back to our vets and our senior citizens and those on Social Security.
All right, thanks for your responses tonight.
Well, now we are going to talk about all of you. The 5 of you bring a mix of backgrounds, both in and out of politics. So our question is, having political experience a good thing or a bad thing? Mr. Ogle.
Yeah, I think that having some political experience is a good thing. I was an Army officer. I was a major. I retired as a major, and I'm an Operation Enduring Freedom veteran, and I work with veterans. So I secured $250 million for veterans, me and 6 other veterans. We work for the Department of Foreign Wars, or via Veterans of Foreign Wars. So is political experience a good thing? Maybe. But I think what needs to be done is for us to be able to address the needs of our nation, what needs to be happening. If I were to be elected, I was probably, and I will, surround myself with people that are smarter than me on the issue that needs to be addressed, and will tell me when I'm absolutely 100% wrong. There's no room for yes men anymore. There's no room for lockstep. There's no room for anybody that wants to kowtow to any ideas. We have to find the truth and get to the best answers, and when the decision is made, we have to just go and make a good decision and move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Ogle. Derek Schmidt.
Of course it's a positive. I think that you wouldn't hire a professional for any job that didn't know how to do the job. And I think it's really critical at this time in America's history that we have people who can hit the ground running and be strong supporters of President Trump the day they take the oath of office, and understand how the machinery of government can work on behalf of you, the people of the state of Kansas. We have to be able to get things done. The critical qualification is understanding Kansas and understanding you and the struggles that you have in your family, in your life, in your businesses. I've spent a lot of time over many years in communities all across this state, big and small, listening to people from every walk of life, coming to understand perspectives that are different from my own. I bring the ability to go get things done that you need done in Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Schmidt. Sean Tiffany.
As a business owner who has interviewed hundreds and hundreds of candidates for employment, I realize how important experience is. But I also realize that things that are more important than experience. Things like integrity, things like work ethic, things like a solid backbone. The founders of our nation were not career politicians. They were farmers, they were soldiers, they were businessmen, and I don't think they ever envisioned a scenario where career bureaucrats and career politicians would govern our nation. Derek Schmidt signed a pledge for term limits. But in reality, he's been in politics since 1992, when I was in junior high. No piece of paper or signature thereof is going to change the fact that he's a career politician. Jeffrey Kars is a career bureaucrat. Unlike my peers up here on the stage, I have never taken a government paycheck a day in my life. It's time we send businessmen and agriculture-minded people and folks that have worked and lived in Kansas to Washington, D.C. to represent us at a national level.
Mr. Tiffany, thank you. Chad Young.
Well, once again, patriots, not politicians. It's been my motto since day one. Politicians have drug us all the way to the pits. $54 to $57 trillion in debt. When are we going to wake up? It wasn't the people that did that. It was the politician. It wasn't the patriot that done that. It was the politician. And it's time we wake up and put a patriot in office that will fight back against the tyranny in America, in government. We, the people, must stand together and doing everything we can to stand, using God and Jesus Christ to fight back. If we do the foundation of God, we win. Bring it back and get rid of the politicians. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Young. And Jeff Cars.
Thank you. Of course, experience matters. For the last 3 years, I've been the senior advisor and the district director for Jake LaTurner. I am not a bureaucrat. I've been a servant. I've been a servant to Governor Brownback. I've been a servant to Congressman Tihart. And before I worked for Mr. LaTurner, President Trump invited me to join his administration, and I oversaw a major cabinet agency in the Midwest. So you better believe experience matters. I have 20 years of experience working on Capitol Hill. If I get elected in August and November, I won't be going up there as a freshman. I'll be going up there as sophomore with my experience. I know what committees I want to serve on. I know the type of staff that I want to serve on. I know how to do constituent services. I've been overseeing that for the Congressman LaTurner, which is a very important part of this job. So I'm looking forward to this. What we don't need is another career politician. And with all due respect to Derek, he has been in and out of office for the last 30 years, and he's been voting with Democrats when he was in the legislature, and he never led one conservative matter when he was the Attorney General. He always followed, unlike our current Attorney General. So yes, experience matters if it's the right type of experience.
Thank you all.
We're going to be hearing more from the candidates coming up, including their closing statements. You're watching our live broadcast. Stay here. Education is our next focus for you tonight. Calls to abolish the U.S. Department of Education date back decades now, but they've really increased in volume over the past several months. The question for our candidates, do you support abolishing the department? And if so, does that also mean that all of its programs should go too, such as student loans and assistance for high poverty schools and special education? Mr. Schmidt, will begin with you.
Well, I think education is a local and state issue, or in the appropriate cases, a family issue. I think the federal Department of Education should never have been created. That was a decision made in the Jimmy Carter administration, and I think it was a mistake of federal public policy. Now, all of these years in, as happens with so much in Washington, it's become entrenched. I think we ought to have a discussion about whether we can abolish the department, dismantle the department, reorganize the department, but the bottom line is I want to see us move all of that power and money out of the bureaucracy in Washington, D.C., and move it back to the states where it belongs. I do think there are important things that the department does that if we are to abolish it, which is fine with me, then I think that we have to find a different home for them. For example, I think some of their civil rights enforcement is very important to make sure that local school districts always have somebody that makes sure every kid's rights are being enforced and that there's a place for folks to go when they need some outside eyeballs and assistance.
All right, Derek Schmidt, thank you. Now to Sean Tiffany.
So education is something I'm very passionate about, and this is why my wife and I have chosen to homeschool our 5 children. It gives us the freedom to educate our children the way we see fit. Matter of fact, my oldest just completed not only his junior year of high school, but also his freshman year of college simultaneously because of the flexibility that allows us. That said, I realize that our means of education isn't right for everybody. And I do believe that parents without question should have the first choice in their education. As far as the Department of Education goes at the federal level, I do think it should be dismantled entirely. It is wasteful. And our children nationally are failing in every matrix compared to foreign students or their foreign counterparts across the world. Furthermore, I do think that that needs to be regulated and is much better, more efficiently done at the state level. We do not need to abolish these special ed programs and other things that you mentioned, but they do need to be done at the state level.
All right, thank you very much for your answer there. Now to Chad Young.
Well, we have to look back again on who we're fighting and where it came from. Mr. Rockefeller, he put his feet right into our educational system, and we look forward to see what Rockefeller put. He made a very horrible quote and a plan for the American people and the children. He said he didn't want a nation of thinkers. He wanted a nation of workers, of slaves. That's all the educational system is doing, is teaching them where they're told to go by big corporation, big government, big tech. It's time to homeschool. It's time to teach our children what we want. It's time to abolish education and lead our people sovereign in sovereignty. And we need to do that now with freedom of mind and critical thinking. We need that today with our children. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Young, and now to Jeff Kars.
Thank you for that question. It's a great question. It's an important question. I absolutely support the abolishing the Department of Education. There are several cabinet agencies that we do not need. Less government is always better than more government. Education needs to be decided at the local level or the state level. It needs to be decided by the parents. The parents need to be in full control of what their kids are being taught in the public school system, period. We don't need the federal government involved. If there is anything good going on at the federal level of Department of Education, we can send that down to the states, and our local school boards and our state school boards can monitor and oversee those programs. But we absolutely do not need a Department of Education. Our education system in our country is failing. We are failing our kids. We are so far behind other nations now because of our failed education system. So the answer is at the local level. The answer is at the state level. And the bottom line is parents need to be in the driver's seats on everything involved with their kids' education.
Mr. Kars, thank you. And our final answer from Michael Ogle.
Well, I don't think we need to abolish the Department of Education. I think we need to have a national minimum standard of what we expect out of a citizen, and that should be the standard that is brought forward into our public education. Our state standards should far exceed the minimum standards. We send our kids to school in cathedrals that have coliseums attached, and yet we can't pay the teachers. So there's got to be something to change in that specific system so that we get better teachers and better education for the kids. It's not about the institution, it's about what comes out of the institution. So a minimum standard is good. I'd never want to give another student loan again, and here's the deal. The student loans are driving up the cost of tuition for the student who thinks they have to because they've been told that their whole life if they don't get an education, they're going to be flipping burgers. But the fact is that's not true. The student loan drives up the cost of the education, and the trust fund gets bigger for the institution at the education. So we need to look at what's going on with those trust funds and keep the cost of education down.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ogle.
We want to take a moment to address mental health. Several of you have alluded to the issue. We at WIBW are in the midst of a Hear Me, See Me initiative raising awareness of mental health. One challenge we've heard about is access. People not in immediate crisis have long waits for appointments. Providers can't find new recruits to their staff. People can't afford care, or they get coverage for just a few sessions when they really need longer-term help. So how can we ensure access for everyone who needs mental health care? Mr. Tiffany, we start with you.
So I'm the son of someone who suffered throughout their lifetime from mental health issues and depression. I know as well as anybody how real these illnesses are. But as a society, we've gone away from addressing and treating mental health, and we prefer, or the medical profession prefers, this ridiculous notion of affirming mental health. And we've got to get back to where we can really care for those that we love by acknowledging that they do have an illness and it's something that needs addressed and is treatable. As far as access goes, we need to continue to have good health systems that will treat mental illness. And then the other thing I would say that we should not do is just continue to medicate, especially our children. Drugs and medication are not always the best answer for mental health. We need therapy and things like that to get over this crisis in our country.
Mr. Tiffany, thank you. By the way, candidates were informed 45 seconds for the final question in the interest of time. We move on to Mr. Young.
Well, once again, we have to know who we're fighting. Well, big tech and big pharma and big corporation. Let's go back to pharma. They want you sick. So what are they doing? Look at our foods that we have in America, first foods that are in Europe. They will not allow us to sell foods in Europe. The ingredients in foods cause what? Autism. I have 2 autistic children. And you know what? It's caused by heavy metals. Again, we have to know who we're fighting. And who are we fighting? What we eat, we become. Wake up, fight big pharma.
Mr. Young, thank you. Jeff Cars.
Thank you for that question. Well, obviously, we have to make sure that people that are actually suffering from mental illness have the help that they need at the state and local level. There's no doubt about that. But we see things going on now. Look at what's going on with kids that are confused about their gender. We're now pushing hormone therapies and surgeries on minors. I think it's wrong. I think it's unethical. Frankly, I think it's evil. I think at the federal level, Congress has to put a stop to this. We have to tell these children's hospitals, you're not going to be able to get financial federal assistance from the federal government until you discontinue these procedures.
Thank you. Michael Ogle.
Yeah, I've had my own battle with mental health. I had a case of PTSD, and I got to tell you, some of these medications do make you angry. They put you in positions where you're not exactly right. And I tell you, I went into the psychological recovery and welfare program here at the Topeka VA, and one of the things it did for me, I realized that I was out at Shawnee Lake with Heroes on the Water, and I said, why am I not happy? I'm kayaking. Why am I not happy? Well, I went in, I got a medication adjustment. It's been the best thing that's ever happened for me. The best thing. And we need to give access. The sheriffs around Shawnee County, around District 2, have all said, we need more access to mental health. That's what we need for the police officers and for the people that they're arresting. We need access to mental health care.
Mr. Ogle, thank you. This question finally to Derek Schmidt.
Some say our current mental health situation is a crisis in this country. That may well be true. I saw it every day in my work with the criminal justice system. So many people in our jails and prisons have mental health issues that went untreated, and it resulted in their doing terrible things in society and hurting other people. We've seen it with our kids. When I was Attorney General for you, we led the effort, I led the effort to create a youth suicide prevention initiative to try to engage with some of our kids when we had a suicide growing numbers all around our state. I believe that as a federal officer, which is what I'm seeking to serve you as now, we really need to focus on those things where the federal government has a unique responsibility. And what Mike Ogle just said is certainly one of them. There are 2 VA hospitals and many other ways that the federal government supports services for our veterans in the 2nd Congressional District, and we must support those.
All right, thank you very much, guys, for your thoughts on all a range of issues tonight. I want to give each of the candidates time now for some final thoughts, 1 minute each again tonight for those closing thoughts, and we're going to go in reverse, alphabetical order this time, starting with Chad Young.
Well, I'm a constitutionalist, and being a constitutionalist gives me stripes, and those stripes are a Republican, a conservative, a value of God first, a Republican second, a conservative second. We have to stay with our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, to keep those stripes. A lot of men go to Senate and they go to Congress, and what happens? They lose those stripes by selling out and breaking the Constitution bill after bill. But now you know me and you know what I stand for. So I'm going to give the next 30 seconds to my God, and I'm going to bow my head to Him.
Thank you, Mr. Young, and now to Sean Tiffany.
Well, I want to thank each one of you for tuning in tonight and being engaged enough to watch this debate. I think your choice is clear. If you feel like you're as well off as you were 4 years ago under an outsider like President Donald Trump, then maybe you have an option. But if you're happy with where you've been with what career politicians have given you, well, then I'm probably not the guy to get your vote. But if you think it's time to do something different in Washington, D.C., send somebody that's an outsider who has had the opportunity to work on behalf of Kansas agriculture and rural broadband and even testified before the Senate Ag Committee, but who has never drawn a government paycheck a day in their life, well, then I think your choice is clear. And it's time to send a cowboy to Congress and send somebody who's willing to go fight on your behalf to Washington, D.C.
Thank you, sir. Final thoughts now from Derek Schmidt.
Well, thanks for taking time to participate tonight and for being an informed citizen. This is the way that our self-governing system is supposed to work, and it's all because you are engaged. This campaign is not about us. Look, there's a political campaign, and the five guys here on the stage and the folks in the other party who are doing the same thing, they're going to take shots at each other and they're going to complain about this or that. But at the end of the day, what's important is that your life be better when this campaign ends and one of us goes as your advocate and your voice in the United States Congress. I would ask you to let me go be your advocate, to stand and fight for you and get things done the way I have throughout my public service on your behalf, to fight and stand tall for our conservative values, and at the end of the day, to leave this state, to leave your family, to leave our communities, and to leave our country better than we find it today. That's what this is supposed to be about, and you have the power to get it done. I'm Derek Schmidt, and I'm asking for your vote for Congress. Thank you.
You, sir. And now to Michael Ogle.
I'm Michael A. Ogle, and I'm asking for your vote on August 6th. I'm a veterans advocate. I've advocated for veterans for a long time, and I've done a lot to advocate to Dennis McDonough. The PACT Act does not do enough. It puts veterans on a registry, and in 30 to 40 years, they're going to tell us how we died. We need to enumerate the toxins that we were exposed to. I am for the politics of Washington. For George Washington, I am weary of foreign entanglements. I say make the most of the Indian hemp seed and grow it everywhere. And if everybody knows a good woman is all you really need, a bad woman will put a man on his knees, and I've found a good woman. So, Nicole Poli, if you're out there, will you marry me?
All right, how about that tonight? And now to Jeff Kars.
Well, I say thank you so much for tuning in tonight and taking a look at this race and all that's going on. The reality is, even though there's 5 men on this stage, this race is really a 2-man race. It's really between Derek Schmidt and myself, and there's a vast difference. This is an easy choice for the conservatives here. You can go with a go-along, get-along career politician who voted with Democrats when he was in the state Senate, who never took any leadership when he was the Attorney General. He always followed other conservative Attorney Generals around the nation, unlike our current Attorney General, who's leading as a conservative within the AG's office. Or you can go someone who's got a record of a strong, consistent, courageous conservative record. I've always worked for conservatives, policy holders, and conservative policies as well. I'm the only candidate on this stage that's worked for President Trump to help implement his agenda. And he's going to need a strong and a consistent, courageous conservative like myself to help him implement the agenda that he has in Washington, D.C. I ask for your vote. Thank you.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much. You've certainly heard a lot tonight from these candidates, and now it's up to you.
Proposals of all kinds.
Yeah.
The deadline to register to vote in the August 6th primary election is tonight. You can do so online until midnight. Right there's the website, kdor.ks.gov/apps/voterreg. Advanced voting by mail begins tomorrow. Check your local elections office for in-person advanced voting. It starts tomorrow in Riley County. Shawnee County, it's Monday. In-person advanced voting ends noon August 5th, and those polls will be open 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. August 6th, primary election day.
And of course, you can always count on WIBW and 13 News to bring you comprehensive election coverage of the primary and the election in November. Thanks for watching tonight. We're glad you were here.
The Democrats are here next week, Tuesday at 4. Have a good night.